everyone. My name is Mukesh Kumar. We are here to talk about database modernization best practices and lessons harvested from our real customer engagements that being from engineering we conduct and we learn while working very closely with our end customer teams as well as partners, be it ISV or SI or GSI teams. And we are with me. I have Raj Pochiraju to do a quick demo of all our first-party tools. Raj, can you give us a quick intro, please?
Thank you, Mukesh. My name is Raj Pochiraju, Principal Program Manager in Azure SQL Group, and my team's core focus is to develop the database migration tools that really help you to do the seamless migrations from Azure, from the on-premises databases to Azure SQL.
Thank you, Raj. So, as I said, our focus here would be to go deep into what Microsoft is in what Microsoft's strategy is towards automation, tooling, codification, and the last but not least is like how are we scaling all our learnings, right? While white gloving these complex engagements back to the community, so you can build on top of this initial learning, and then we as a team can mature and really help solve many of our enterprise customers' complex problems. Um, so as part of investment and strategy, um, Microsoft has put different types of investment in place, right? And many of you already know our hero products in migration tools and services space, named as Azure Data Migration Service. We call it DMS. We have DMA, DEA, then few incubating tools that does not stop the assessment and discovery process just at data tier, but also goes and probes, let's say, data access layer within the app, and that's happening through DAMT. And then tools like and products like Azure Migrate, which is one single pane of glass that gives you an extremely unified experience to package all your infra discovery, assessment, and migration strategy, as well as apps and data, right? And Raj, as part of his CAN demo, he's going to talk about this. And just as a reminder, we have another session where we will be spending a good 1 hour, close to 1 hour, going deep into these tools. So just as a reminder. And then, like Microsoft also understands that while we are giving world-class tools and products, there is a continued learning and there is a continued codification needed. And these codifications will not be impactful if Microsoft does not gain this experience firsthand while working with you, while working with our esteemed customers and partners. And that's why Microsoft is investing in engineering-led customer-facing success teams. Like within Data Group, we got different customer success engineering. SQL has something called Data SQL Ninja. At Azure level, many of you might have already worked with Azure Migrate Plan and teams like Fast Track. So this is like another layer of investment where we want to go and aid your process of complex modernization and digital transformation, not by just giving you the product, but also product expertise along with. And end of the day, it's a mutual success, whether we are fast failing or fast succeeding together, right? And all these learnings are being also like we are counting ourselves very responsible to scale these learnings through publicly accessible channels like Database Migration Guide. There are a lot of documentations on even on our MSDN docs that would be giving you end-to-end view of a source as well as target specific migration journey, starting from pre-migration to post-migration. So just to recap, like this should be explaining you how Microsoft is thinking towards helping you with complex migrations and modernization and giving you a true end-to-end experience when it comes to your apps and data together. Like just to go a little deeper into how are we scaling and how contextual this learning scale model would look like. This slides should give you a quick glimpse of it, right? So on datamigration.microsoft.com or various docs that we are enriching as we speak, will give you an end-to-end view of, let's say, if you want to start from SQL Server as a source modernization, definitely you have multiple, if you see this relationship here, multiple options, multiple targets to land. But when do you choose what and how do you really land on these targets? This will be prescribed, right? And the prescribed guidelines around for each of these source and target is directly enriched by engineering. So this is something we would highly recommend that you bookmark and follow up offline. Go there and do please give us feedback. Okay. Now this is a very important slide, and many of you who come from SI and GSI background might resonate this better than anyone else, right? End of the day, when you go and bet your SI strategy to make a customer's modernization or digital transformation successful, you are betting on our product capability, you are betting on our automation and tools capability. But end of the day, customer would always have one question in mind. Okay, how really this translates into dollars and timelines, right? Like cost and timelines. And many of you who are from SI and JSI would know that the estimation model that you create will have different work breakdown structure. Each work breakdown structure will be basically fit into these different typical steps that undergoes if you are migrating any application which has underlying database in it, right? So you will undergo the envision and access, you will convert database schema, then you will migrate and so on, up to support post-production. Now, to answer the question, like how exactly Microsoft tools and services are helping them save cost and time, what we are doing very, I would say, consciously is that we are enriching from each and every of our engagement. We are enriching the percentage of effort that we are saving in each of these typical steps, right? So envision and assess by just using our first party and third party tools, you are going to be saving somewhere between 5 to 15% of overall effort. Why? Because there is a ton of automation that Azure Migrate and DMA and DMS is going to give you, starting from discovery to profiling to inventory of items, which itself is an extremely manual and labor intense task if Microsoft does not give you this capability, right? Similarly, with the help of the second pillar of our investment, where Microsoft is investing in direct customer success engineering, is not limited to just one or two steps acceleration, right? We are pretty much engaged end to end, starting from step 1 to step 11. Again, this is very high level, right? But if you sit down and we discuss like how exactly it translates, it's extremely deeper level of white glove that we are talking here, right? And I mean, you can look through this metrics and you can really articulate real saving in terms of cost and time, right? That Microsoft end-to-end focus and investment in this area is going to give customer to, right? Moving to next one, of course, as part of database modernization, uh, there are many drivers, right? And I'm fully convinced that the drivers that you're going to see on this slide is just tip of the iceberg, right? You are living and breathing that those key drivers being in middle of that industry problem or your company specific digital transformation, right? So, but some of these will make a lot of sense. And this also will make sure that we are on same page and you will understand how we are thinking key drivers that maps to what you are really envisioning every day and living and breathing that life every day. So compliance, right, is one of the key drivers, be it for, let's say, many of you might have undergone a SQL end of support modernization drive, right? Compliance would have been one of the top reasons why you had to trigger this modernization, right? And that is not limited to just industry compliance, but ISVs and COTS products also have to be compliant with their own SLA, whether industry regulates them or not, right? Of course, scale or new business functionality, like this is a very loaded term, but many of you might be fully aware that when you migrate, most of the time, post migration, you have an aspiration to scale. And scale does not mean simple single machine, scale out capability versus, oh, adding more machines on the fly. No, it's not restricted to that, right? If you do one application migration successful from source to target platform on Azure and Azure Data, you will most likely you will start. Scale would mean that you are adding net new assets, net new workloads, cloud native, SQL native on our platform, and that's a true scale for us, right? And you might be doing that for various reasons like new market expansion or new business functionality that you want to release for your business. On the same line, we have few other items like HADR, again, part of the process, right? To solve some of your, the services and SLA commitments that you may have for your business, right? To get an answer around that. Of course, cost reduction is one of the top reasons. And then I talked about new market beat for business to business or business to consumer that your business needs, right, as part of the expansion planning. So these are like some of the key drivers. As I said, there are many more. But with these key drivers, let me go to like when it comes to data modernization use cases, um, I want to make sure that you, in a very simplistic form, right, we understand what does this mean, right? When technically or functionally, a product company like Microsoft, when we look at this problem statement, there are three broader use cases. One is how do we successfully and efficiently migrate a schema as well as first-time data migration, right? Um, and then the scale comes into picture. Like, okay, so we have done the one-time data migration for one asset. In a data estate, we may have hundreds or thousands of such assets. How do we rinse and repeat, or how do we automate that model, right? So our products. In next slide, you're going to see the metrics across these phases, and I'm going to double click a little bit around how we are handling both the scenarios, right? First, schema and data migration, then a scale of this use case, right, across different assets. The second use case is data replication and sync, and not limited to what you see here on the slide, like for batch or near real-time sync. There are other use cases too, but we put this just so it resonates better with you, right? And near real-time meaning there is a latency as part of source and target sync that is bearable, right? And then the third is extreme case where, like extremely high SLA and no appetite whatsoever for latency, not just in terms of transactions per second latency tolerance level, but also in terms of milliseconds of latency in terms of one system versus other system, right? So these are like primarily three use cases that all of us deal with in data modernization challenges. Now, like this slide is very interesting where I'm not going to repeat like trends. We have already talked about it, and you know it better than anyone else, right? I mean, many of you are living and breathing this every day. And then keywords being, like whether it's a SQL, any of the trend listed here, these are some of the key FUD factors, FUD being fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Like what would be my target architecture, right? Oh, post-migration is all my applications downstream and upstreams, as well as the absolute application that's in the scope of migration will be compatible or not, right? Oh, what would be my migration path, right? Like some of these are extremely top of the list for factors, but then to achieve these trends, right, and then win over these FUD factors, Microsoft's strategy in terms of tools and IPs is very holistic. And we have tied back to all the use cases that I just talked in the previous slide, where assessment, object and schema migration, one-time data migration, data replication and sync for near real time, and then CDC for the real time use cases. How are we achieving? How is our first party tools, right? And the combination of third party tools are really going to help you achieve that end-to-end. And as you can, if you recall, the session's topic is end-to-end modernization. And I want to make sure that before we go any further, you truly understand why we are saying this is an end-to-end and taking pride in really articulating what that end-to-end means. Of course, we have a lot of room to improve and continue to improvise, which we will. But just to help you understand, like what tools can you bring, let's say, as part of the homogeneous modernization, like SQL modernization for assessment, DMA, many of you have used it, right? You can also use that for object and schema migration and one-time data migration. Again, SQL to SQL modernization on cloud or on-prem. Then DMS is doing pretty much same thing, starting from object and schema migration to one-time data migration, and also certain use cases of CDC, right? And then DMS is a Azure managed platform service to do pretty much what DMA does. And Raj will talk more about this as part of his dedicated session on tools. And then ADF, many of you know, this is Azure Data Factory. It enables very effective and efficient one-time data migration as well as data replication and sync pipelines. There are various out-of-box inbuilt pipelines that you can leverage, and if there are complex situations, you can lean on the custom pipelines. And then SSIS, many of you know, right? I mean, SSIS, wherever ADF cannot tunnel in or there are a lot more customizations needed as part of the pipeline, SSIS has been an evergreen product, as many of you might have used it already. And then last but not least, like especially for data replication and sync and CDC, there are various third-party tools which are doing very good job, right, in market space to give you, very niche and I would say aggressive SLA. Like how do you meet those aggressive SLAs in terms of data replication and CDC requirements? Um, some to name would be like Unity, HBR, and Stream, etc. Moving to next one. So that was all about homogeneous. As part of heterogeneous being non-SQL platforms like Oracle and mainframe DB2, IMS, VSAM, etc. Right? Trends-wise, there would be few new items, but pretty much what we saw, what we discussed as part of the SQL modernization trends, they're all applicable here, right? I'm not gonna spend time there. I would rather focus on keywords and the first party tooling and product strategy that we have in this session. And again, as you see, like for any of these trends, the four factors remain same, right? Like, oh, what my migration path would be, what kind of targets do I have, right? Like what kind of platforms can I land on if I'm moving from Oracle? Is PostgreSQL the only solution or SQL the only solution? No, that's where Microsoft as an enterprise product company does offer a lot of choices for you to choose from. And if I can move to quickly on my next slide, you will see that like Oracle can land on SQL Server, can also land on SQL Server PaaS options. You can bring them on PostgreSQL, and then other products are also in the mix. And depending on how high level use case, like what kind of advanced requirements you have multiple choices to choose from. And we feel really good about giving our customers a choice, right? And really be part of the problem to give solution rather than be ready with the solution and then ask for problem, right? And I hope you understand what I'm trying to say with this. If I go to next steps, like this is a next level of details to the previous slide that I just talked about, where you have multiple choices, right? In this, what we have done, like we have taken Oracle as an example, right? And then for Oracle, different type of workloads, as many of you might know, like OLTP or ODS, Exadata, Oracle RAC, and NoSQL type of workload. And then based on their app category, what are the low-hanging fruits and why, right? So there's a rationale. For example, if there is an Oracle ISV, OLTP or ODS app, right? And they are certified on PostgreSQL, and they are certified on PostgreSQL Hyperscale Citus, right? Um, it's no brainer. Like these are highlighted as green. They really support a rehost option, which is one of the fastest way of bringing your workload from these platforms to a newer platform like PostgreSQL or Azure. Now, SQL Server, Azure SQL DB, and Azure SQL MI, like different service tiers within SQL, are also a very good next set of options available with a rationale. Because while PostgreSQL and PostgreSQL gives the language and feature parity, for SQL we have a lot of first-party automation with the tools such as SSMA, right? There is a lot of acceleration that we do. There is a lot of re-engineering effort that we reduce. And and just imagine a customer who wants to, or a workload which has to re-engineer not just a data tier but also at app tier, and have to have new business functionalities, have to have new modern implementations. SQL platform becomes a very, very viable platform, and it's still in the green zone given the amount of automation we have. Same goes for custom apps and line of business apps, right? So this would also show you like how Microsoft is envisioning not just its product strategy that you see here, but also like how are we differentiating the engine level parity? How are we trying to bring a level-headed choice for you to consider other platform, but it is backed by an extreme automation and codification in the form of products like SSMA. Okay. Moving to next one. For heterogeneous, as you saw on the homogeneous side, for heterogeneous, we again have similar type of end-to-end coverage, right? Like if you recall the data migration use cases, you might have seen assessment, object and schema migration, and then data migration split into three categories: one time, data replication, and sync and CDC. Now there are a bunch of assessment activities, right, that are being accelerated by SSMA, but there are a lot of niche appliance and hardware specific gotchas, right, that prohibits us from running SSMA to those Oracle and mainframe environments. And for that, what we are doing is we are creating custom scripts that can be handled complying to all the requirements and data privacy needs by the customer's DBA on their own, but then they can share that result with us after the script is run, and we can give them exact same path of maturity, same path of automation, right? After capturing this output from these assessment scripts. And after Raj's demo, I will talk briefly about some of these IPs and how can you get access of these IPs. These are available in public Git. I will again request some of these scripts need continued maturity and enrichment, and we are highly relying on you while you use. Please give us the feedback to further mature, right? Because ultimately, our North Star would be that these scripts are merging into SSMA, right? Or being codified and productized for the ease of use at a scale, right? Similarly, for object and schema migration, you might be very familiar with SSMA, and then one-time data migration. And I'm pleased to inform that for SSMA, we have also released the support for DB2 for AS400, which was long time missing. So if you have not been aware of, please make a note of this. SSMA is not restricted to for DB2 to just GOS or LUW, but also iSeries AS400 now. And a lot of innovation and new features are being introduced on Oracle front. Very likely on weekly basis. So please keep a tab on all the release that we are doing for SSMA. ADF, we have talked about ADF during SQL, but ADF being a very unique product from our side, which supports multiple sources and multiple sinks as targets, right? And one of them being, and majority of the sources that are supported are from heterogeneous platforms such as Oracle and mainframe and Sybase. SSIS I have talked. I'm going to skip that. DRDA, many of you might be aware of our HIS product line, in which we have DRDA Gateway and DRDA Service. And DRDA is a classic product, right? That helps us introduce and bring the coexistence model, right? Like for example, if DB2 has to be in sync, right? There has to be a package level binding invoked so that a COBOL code or PL1 code can work seamlessly with DB2 as well as SQL while the whole multi-month migration process is going on. DRDA is very instrumental to go enable that scenario, right? DRDA also helps us through being Microsoft's first party tool to really enable CTC, right? And good thing with this is we own the code and we can go to any level of customizing the CDC and data replication requirements using DRDA. Okay. With this, let me hand it over to my friend Raj Pochiraju to give a quick summary of these tools and a very brief demo of all these tools. Raj, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mukesh. So before I go to the demo, I just want to recap what Mukesh talked about in terms of the different phases in the migration journey, and he also introduced the specific tools. But let me share my desktop at first. Yeah, so thanks. The slide is already there. So yeah, so if you look at the specific sources that we support migrating from SQL Server and as well as Oracle. And when it comes to the open sources, we do support migrating from MySQL and PostgreSQL as well. And then we also support migrating from the MongoDB to Cosmos DB. Not only that, we really support migrating from on-premises environment, we also support migrating from the other clouds like AWS and Google Cloud that you can really migrate to the specific Azure targets that you are seeing on the right side. And then when it comes to the specific tools, Mukesh has talked very elaborately on the tools, but I just want to make sure that I also touch upon them a little bit here because we're going to use some of these tools for the upcoming demo that I'm going to be doing. So when it comes to assessments and as well as the discovery of your environment, you would use the Azure Migrate service to do the discovery and find out the application dependencies and find out the Azure readiness migrating to the readiness of your on-premises assets migrating to the Azure. And then when it comes to the SQL Server, you are going to use the tool called Data Migration Assistant tool that really help you to assess your schema and as well as the database layer of the application to see if there are any objects that you need to mitigate as part of your migration plan. And then Mukesh talked about SSMA when you are migrating from Oracle's Sybase DB2, that it really help you to do the schema conversions, automated schema conversions, right? That is the part of the assessments and pre-migration stage. And when it comes to the actual migrations, the Azure Database Migration Service is the one which is going to really help you to do the near zero downtime migration of your existing on-premises databases to Azure. So that is what I'm going to be showing my demo today. So let me start sharing my desktop to switch to the demo. It's going to take just a minute here. Yep. As part of the demo, what I'm going to be doing is let me introduce the environment at first for you. So I have a SQL Server 2017 instance, which is running in my on-premises data center. My goal is that I want to really assess the number of databases that are there here, and then see how ready those databases are migrating to Azure SQL managed instance, and then use our tools, the database migration service tool, to do the actual migration into a managed instance, which you are seeing here, Private Buddy, which I already provisioned that managed instance. So my goal is to migrate one or two of these databases to the managed instance here. So just to set expectations here, this demo, I'm not really going very deep into the tools. We have another session where we are really going into the deep of these tools. But my goal here is to introduce the tools and how you can really leverage those tools to navigate through the migration experience assessment and as well as the migration, right? So having part of that, the very first step that you need to do is you need to really perform an assessment at first to see how ready these databases are migrating to Azure. For that reason, I'm going to go to a portal here, and then the tool that you are going to use for doing the assessment is called Database Migration Tool. Now the question comes, how do I get that? So we have a very good aka dot link that you can use to get to the DMA. So this is the link aka.ms get DMA. Let me do that. aka.ms get DMA. And you can download it from the Microsoft Download Center. This is a free desktop tool that you can really just install on your on-premises environment and then connect to your SQL servers and start assessing your databases migrating to Azure SQL. So I kind of already downloaded the tool, and this is how the tool is going to look like for you once you install and launch it. The very first step that you're going to be doing is you're going to be performing an assessment. So for that, you click on this plus sign and you give a name to the assessment, for example, and then you would say, are you doing an assessment of your database engine, or you're going to be assessing your integration services? So all the IAS packages that are integration services packages that you might have. And then here you're going to mention the source SQL Server type, whether it is an on-premises environment or is it hosted on AWS RDS for SQL Server. So we have an ability that you can assess SQL servers which are hosted in both environments. And then you would want to choose a specific target where you have an intention to migrate. In this case, I'm going to choose Azure SQL Database Manager instance as my target, and then I'm going to create a project for that. And there are a couple of options here. One is the check database compatibility and check feature parity. The database compatibility really help you to look at your schema and find out if there are any objects that are using some kind of legacy syntax. If that is if that is not supported on the Azure SQL, then it will really pinpoint to a specific object and also provide you a mitigation steps that you can really can implement as soon as your migrations are done. And then it also looks for the any migration blockers to migrate into a specific target. In this case, it is going to be a manager instance as your target. And then feature parity is not only that we look at the databases, but we also look at the surface level features at the SQL Server instance level. For example, you might be using SQL Server agent jobs, or you might be using SSAS packages, or you might be using, logins, Windows logins, SQL Server logins. We look at all those server objects, and then we also look at the specific features that are currently in use and see how those features are being supported on the Azure SQL as well. If not, we will give you the alternative recommendations that you can still be able to migrate to Azure SQL. So I'm going to choose both of those options here. And then you're going to be connecting to a source SQL Server. We support both Windows authentication and all the other authentication methods for you. And then now the DMA is going to connect to your source environment. You can assess all your databases, or you can really pick and choose which databases that you want to assess. While this option, these databases, we're going to assess your schema, but at the same time, if you have any workload that you want to assess from the database layer, then you can simply collect all your workload from your application by means of SQL Server trace files or by means of extended events, and then you can bring that output of those extended trace files that you might have into a location where we can really use to trace it. Actually, for example, I have a folder called demos here, data access layer, and then I got the SQL Server traces that I collected using the SQL Server profiler, and then I put all those outputs into Parts Unlimited folder here. Then you can really point the DMA to there, and then you can add. That way, you're not only assessing your database schema, but you're also assessing the workload that you collected through the database layer, which is running in the application. And then you can perform an assessment here. If you want to really assess multiple SQL servers, you can do that as well by clicking this option, right? So, and then you can do that assessment as well, so that you can assess multiple SQL servers at the same time. And then you just hit that assessments button, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share an assessment that I already done to save the time here. And then here is the assessment report looks like. At first, it will give you if there are any unsupported features that you need to really look into it. And there is especially for this SQL instance, there is one unsupported issue here with multiple log files. So unless you really restructure your log file to a single log file, you may not be able to migrate to managed instance. That is one option that you need to choose here. And then if you look at the compatibility options here, some databases looks like very clean. They don't have any compatibility issues to begin with. There could be other databases that might have some breaking changes that you need to address after the migration is done. For example, if you look at the fast first row, this this option is not supported anymore with Azure SQL. So you need to make sure that you fix this specific stored procedure. Not only that, we pinpoint you the stored procedure, but we also give you, how to mitigate this option. So in my demo, I really want to migrate the database called Parts Unlimited DB, and this DB does not have any compatibility issues. It also does not have any feature parity issues that reported. So this database is ready to go to Azure SQL Managed Instance. Now my next step is to migrate to Managed Instance, and that is where I'm going to use the service called Azure Database Migration Service to do that. So for that reason, I logged into the portal to start doing the migration of the database. The migration of the database includes three different steps. The first step is you need to create the DMS service if it is not created already. Then you need to establish a migration project, setting up a migration between your source and target. And then the next step is you just do the migration cutover, right? So to create a service, you just click on the create button there, look for Azure Database Migration Service. You'll find the Azure Database Migration Service here. And then it has very simple steps actually. You just create button there. You just need to provide the specific subscription where you want to create your service, select a specific resource group, and then give a name to the migration service. And more important step is you want to pick a specific size of your DMS service. Standard, it has two tiers, standard and premium. Standard is really help you to do the offline migrations where it might require much more longer downtime. If your workloads can take that kind of a downtime, you can use standard SKU. But in case if you need to minimize the downtime, then you're going to be using the premium tier, which comes up with the 4 vCore size. This is also free for the first 6 months of your service creation. So essentially, the database migration service is free for you to do the migrations, right? So I'm going to select the premium because I'm going to be doing online migration here. The other step is that you also want to create, select the network here. So you want to make sure that you select a specific network that really provide you access to your on-premises world and as well as the to your target managed instance. And if you don't have any network available here, you can also create a network through this experience. So you would create a new network or select an existing network, and then you just go and then hit a create button there. So the service creation would usually take around 10 to 12 minutes. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to use the existing service itself, which is Raj PO DMS demo 2 here. And then there are a bunch of projects that are already there here. The specific project that I am already started doing the migration is called the Parts Unlimited project. And then the migration is currently running here. We use backup and restore technology for doing migrations from on-premises SQL Server to managed instance. As you see here, the full backup is already restored, and then bunch of transaction log backups are also restored. So the migration is currently active. And by the way, your migration downtime is not started yet because your source is still active and your applications are still connecting to your sources. When you're ready to do the migration cutover, that is the time that you stop all the incoming traffic that is coming into your sources, and then you take the final log backup and then bring that log backup to the SMB network share. And then the DMS can really restore that backup as well. And once that backup is restored, you can call a start cutover button here. But before we go there, I want to show you the migration project experience, how that going to look like. So you just hit a create project button, and then that will simply take you to the workflow where you provide your source information at first. So you provide your source SQL for instance here, and then the authentication type, and then the DMS really validates the connectivity of it. Next step is that you need to really provide a target information here. In the target, at first you need to provide an application ID and a key so that the DMS can use this application ID to connect to the cloud services like storage account and as well as your managed instance, which is also a cloud service. So you provide that information there, and then you select a specific subscription where we can pick up the managed instance to restore. And then we also provide the user ID and password for the managed instance. And now in the next step, you would select a specific database that you want to migrate. By the way, DMS does validations in each and every blade to make sure that this workflow continuously works so that your migration can be successful. So now it is validating, and I'm going to be selecting Parts Unlimited DB. And then here, like I mentioned, we need to make sure that we provide a SMB network share where the DMS can pick up the full backup and as well as the log backups. and provide a user account that DMS can use to access this network share, and then upload those backup files to a Azure storage account that you selected, and then use it for migration. And then you can also mention the database name change if you really want to restore it to a different name. So I'm going to keep that as a different name here, and then go to the next step. In the next step, again, it is going to validate all the network share access, and as well as the database does not exist with the same name. This type of validations happens at this point of time. And then in the next step, you just need to confirm that everything is right to start your migration. So as simple as that. So what we did so far is we created a DMS service and we established a migration project, and we went through the migration project workflow. And then at this point, you just hit a start migration button. Like I said, I already have the migration that I established here. So I'm going to go back here. I'm not going to save this information, but I'm going to go to Parts Unlimited here. And then this migration is happening now. Now, what I'm going to do is imagine that I'm ready to do the migration cutover. So at this point, what I do, I stop all the traffic that is coming into the application. Now I'm going to take the final log backup here, backup log of the Parts Unlimited DB with a log number is, backup file number is 13. So I'm going to take this backup to this network share where the DMS can pick up that backup file to use it for migration. So I'm going to take that backup here. And then the backup is already successful. And you go back to your DMS service now and refresh this. It's supposed to pick up the backup file from that location. And then the soon that it picks up that backup location, you start seeing it here. Just give one more minute, one more 30 seconds or something to see if it is going to get refresh. Yeah, it's taking a little longer, but otherwise you will see that file here. Once the file is done, it will get restored. And once the restore is done, you will see that the restore status is provided here, so that you can really call the migration cutover. So that means is that you are able to migrate, you are able to take the final log backup after all the incoming traffic is stopped to your source application, and you used that backup file to do the final cutover. Yeah, so it's taking a little longer, but otherwise what you could do is, yep, the file sees the log backup is already, now it is queued. It is going to restore. Once the restore is done, then the start cutover button will be enabled. You just hit the start cutover button so that the target database will become online, and then you simply go on and change your connection string after that. So at this point, I'm not going to do the cutover for saving the time here, but it should be as simple as that. Okay, so that's how you're going to use the DMS service to do the actual migration by minimizing your downtime. Now let me switch back to my slide so that I can really share some of the roadmap items that we have. Okay, so this is a roadmap slide where what we did in the first half of this calendar year is that majorly we delivered the DMS hybrid service, which really help you to do the leverage the DMS service when you don't have a site-to-site connectivity between your on-premises environment and as well as the Azure. So that way you can bring the DMS worker to the on-premises environment itself, so that it can really establish a connectivity without having to have a site-to-site connectivity. So that is in public preview. And then going forward in the next half of the calendar year of 2020, we are making heavy investments to bring the online database migration to SQL VM. Today, you have seen with Target as a managed instance, but we are going to bring the online migration experience to VMs. And then we are also doing the integration of the assessments and everything with Azure Migrate, so that you can have a end-to-end migration experience in the Azure Migrate. And then we want to further simplify the database migrations by bringing the migration experience into the client tools like Azure Data Studio and Management Studio, so that you can really launch the migrations from the client tools that you are familiar with it. So that's about the roadmap that we really want exciting to deliver to you guys. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Mukesh for the rest of the presentation. Thank you, Mukesh.
Thank you, Raj. Great demo. All right, so I'm switching to my next set of slides. So transitioning from what Raj explained as part of our focus and depth on first-party tools and services. Here I want to talk about some of the custom IPs, right, which are still not part of those tools, but they are very critical to really land some of the complex migrations. Not and complexity here is not just limited to technical complexities or workload specific complexities, but also tied back to other complexities such as data privacy, network access, right? And then nature of engagement. For example, a technical decision versus a consulting decision, right? There is a huge difference between the time and effort and the skills it requires, right? So on this slide, these are some of the, I would say, heavily utilized IPs that we are seeing on top in conjunction with our first tools that are being used. Okay, and I would like to point your attention towards this GitHub repo. This is available publicly, so if you want to gain access of these custom IPs and many more, please save or bookmark this URL. Data migration team is the Git name if you want to search. So coming back to type of IPs, right? Like on very top, you have workload assessment framework. Now, the reason we had to develop this is because when our existing tools, let's say DMA gets used or SSMA gets used, um, it gives a very level-headed information in a language that is understandable by technical folks and business folks, right? But not necessarily that every GSI like Accenture or Infosys or every customer, right, from let's say discrete manufacturing sector to financial sector will use or comprehend or might want to bet everything in terms of what the tool is giving, right? So what we have done is, as part of this framework, we are giving a score and weight pattern and very customizable uh, area, sub-area of impact for their business that they want to, that they themselves, like a individual customer or a line of business within that customer, can go and assign, right? And based on that, they can derive a workload complexity and then profile different complexity applications in many clusters, and that way, like it's it's very easy based on tying it back to this effort with what DMA or Azure Migrate can provide, right, from discovery output, which ones are something that they need to go after first, right? So this customizable assessment framework aids to the decision-making process of on top of what Azure Migrate or DMA will provide, right, as part of discovery and inventory process. And as I said, it's highly customizable. And people like from GSI community and some of such customers who are embarking on a factory model of workload modernization, they're heavily using it, right? And they're contributing back with their feedback as well to mature it. So this is something you can definitely get access to by just subscribing to this data migration team GitHub. Similarly, if source or target metrics, like you saw a glimpse of this in my presentation where we talked about specific source, Oracle or mainframe, and what are the different options, right, on Azure Data Platform for you to choose from. And then our next level of detailing, like, okay, different type of workloads, Oracle workloads, tying it back to different types of apps, right? Because you cannot have same parameter for an Oracle custom app same as an ISB app, and absolutely not same as their line of business apps, right? Like absolutely different context, and the complexity to migrate, modernize, re-engineer, or rehost drastically change, right? So a detailed and even more level-headed scenarios, right, you will find in this source or target metrics. Similarly, on the technical front, the third item that I have listed here is migrate logins script. Now, this is part of DMS already, but there are often very various customers, right, where they can't or they don't, they either can't or they don't want to have an Azure DMS tunneling happening in their environment, right? But it's very important, even before they can go and let's say try implement their traditional database migration methods like backup restore, right? There are often many use cases where they have to migrate the logins from source to Azure. SQL DB. Now, in those cases, they can run these independent scripts, get those users migrated, and then they rely on the traditional ways of migrating database from, let's say, one source to other source on Azure. Okay. Similarly, on the heterogeneous line, we have things like DTL converter, right, from Netezza, or for that matter, we can use and bootstrap this IP to take other DDL schema from other platforms, right, and tweak it in such a way that it converts the DDLN schema to Azure SQL DB as well as in SQL DW, aka Synapse. Now, these are another set of highly used IPs in marketplace today. Like again, a lot of customers and tech community folks from GSI side are using this. Last but not least, DB2, I just said, as part of the heterogeneous tooling strategy, during assessment, while we have SSMA, there are so many advanced requirements and restrictions from appliance and hardware perspective that we had to have custom IPs and custom discovery scripts, and this is one of such example, right? And it's not restricted to just custom script. Basically, you can go run this script, get the output in CSV, and hand it back to your mainframe modernization team, who is either working with like engineering team, our team, or working with one of our trained partners, right? They can make the best use of these repositories and really accelerate your modernization journey. So as I said, these are some of the highlights, some of the highly used IPs. There are many more, and please bookmark this Git repo. Moving to next one, and on the same line, you have another inventory script for LUW. Moving to next one, I would like to talk about a couple of case studies, public case studies that has been full of learnings and the impact of these wins, right? Migrating from on-prem or other sources, including heterogeneous sources, to our Azure SQL data platform have been phenomenal. Have not just impacted an industry level change, but they have literally changed the people life also, right? Human lives, especially during this pandemic. Like one of the classic example is this UK based NHS NEL. And as many of you know who come from UK or Europe, you might know this entity. It's very critical entity within UK, and this specific division is the data insights division of NHS, and various scale operations, various research algorithms, like reports from on the ground from clinics and public hospitals, right? They're all either as an input comes to this platform, or the outputs from government side and the researcher side go back to individual remote locations through this system. And this was originally working on SQL on-prem, and given during this pandemic, uh, before this pandemic actually kicked in, NHS already had undergone a modernization from SQL to SQL managed instance, and majority of their OLAP, right, and their data warehouse activities were switched to data lake and Databricks. Okay, and then SQL managed instance was used for the operational data store, and the power of Azure data platforms who truly help them enable a Lambda, very scalable Lambda model, right, on Azure, uh, is truly has helped NHS to really scale at the level that they would not have been able to achieve if they had not undergone this migration during this pandemic, right? The need for scale went so high for this customer that we, like, while we are in touch with the customer teams, they are really thankful that we teamed up, we worked as a team, and we really landed this workload from on-prem to Azure, leveraging Azure Data SQL platform, platform, so that they are able to meet their current requirements and the needs. And again, this is a public case study. There are nice videos that you can go on Microsoft case study site and learn about how they really embarked. and they have very bold plan as well, right? I mean, they have gotten the taste of this modernization, and they're trying to modernize many of their other line of business on the similar fashion. Moving to next one, this is another example of showing the strength of SQL platform, and also it's making it very evident that uh, Microsoft data products like SQL and SQL DB is becoming a core of mission critical tier zero workloads, provided it's architected, it's planned, and it's designed, uh, following all the best practices, right? And this is a classic example of a European bank called mBank, which is part of the Commerce Bank in some capacity. Uh, this is a public case study again, like while moving their COBOL and DB2 to .NET Core and SQL, and they are in process of adopting SQL DB as well as part of their next, new business functionality implementation. Um, in this modernization, mBank betted on .NET and betted on Microsoft actually, and they're bringing. Um, they transform their COBOL, like they transform their core banking B2B solution from COBOL and DB2 to .NET, HIS, DRDA, and SQL. They, as part of their scale, they wanted to have new set of customers onboarding on their platform, this B2B platform, which necessarily didn't need to have same level of perf, right, as their existing customers were gaining on their mainframe platform. And if they had to really onboard new business, right, and new customers on existing mainframe platform, their total cost of ownership and ROI would have been completely would not have been healthy, right? And like overall they could secure close to 10x of saving just in operational expenditure. I'm not even talking about their capex investment, by simply betting their next gen product modernization to come on .NET Core, so that they're guest OS independent, agnostic, right, per their customers need, and then landing on moving their DB2 to SQL Server, right, using a compiler called Raincode that they use to really get the speed to market, right, while moving complex code base of COBOL and DB2 to .NET Core and SQL. They used Raincode, and this is basically a very nice case study that I would encourage you folks to go through. On the similar line, there are like close to 100 plus customers, right, after this success, that we are also directly priming and helping them modernize away from their mainframe to SQL, Azure, and Azure Data Platform. With this, let me go to the next one. So Volvo is on the same line. They're bringing their core inventory management system, moving away from DB2 to SQL DB, and it has gone live. And we have, again, this is another place where we used Raincode to really accelerate that journey and give that middleware, right, robust enough so that some traffic existing latency savvy traffic can go to mainframe, but other traffic who does not need to have microsecond of latency can be diverted towards x86 distributed platform hosted on SQL DB, right? And again, Volvo is in process of bringing more and more workloads to Azure and SQL DB platform after this success. I'm pretty much done with this session, but I would like to remind some of the critical session resources in addition to, again, that Git repo that I shared on earlier slide. You can simply, like, in order to get Azure DMS, it's very simple. Go to ak.ms/Azure DMS, and we are trying to do a good job to make it really user friendly and something that you can remember, right? So product name is Azure DMS. Just remember ak.ms/ and put that product name Azure DMS. You will get these products. Similarly for DMA, similarly for SSMA. Database migration guide, again, I'm reiterating, this is a one-stop shop for you where you can go get source and target specific details, step-by-step prescriptive guidelines. And keep in mind, these guidelines are directly being enriched and refreshed by the engineering. And this will also be available in our docs very soon. So you have like multiple places to go and find a very consistent info. With that, thank you so much for your time. And on behalf of Raj and I, wish you great upcoming sessions and in this wonderful event. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.